My husband quit his job the day I got promoted, hid his abusive mother in our guest room, drained $50,000 from our savings, and let her sabotage my pregnancy while pretending she was dying. When I asked him why, he said, "Because you'll leave," but she never did. That was 6 months ago. Today, they're both watching me raise our daughter alone, wishing they could be involved. My husband is the only man I could find that not only worked as many hours as I did, but made the same amount of money as me too. That might not sound like much, but when you make 6 figures a year, men will try to capitalize on that. Not only by asking to split the bill 50-50, which I was fine with, but they'd also guilt me into paying for everything. Their holidays, their home renovations. Both of my exes also did this thing where they'd text once in a while asking why they weren't getting flowers. Like, okay buddy, you want backshots too? I honestly thought the male generation had been destroyed by the sassy men apocalypse. Luckily, my husband Jack proved me wrong. He'd take me out on dates twice a week and tell me that all I had to do was get ready and be there. He was literally perfect. My man. So when we were 2 years into our marriage and I got a promotion at work, Jack was the first one I told. "Baby, that's even more money than I make," he exclaimed. I nodded and we proceeded to go to the Capitol Grill in New York City. When the bill came around, I expected him to put his card down like always. Instead, he practically fled to the bathroom. Little did I know that was the first turning point of our marriage. Usually we'd get home at around the same time, but after that I'd come home to find him already on the couch watching a basketball game. So when this happened for weeks in a row, I asked him what was going on. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. I cut my hours in half at work." He said it like it was the most casual thing ever. "I'm sorry, honey. I just figured that since you're earning so much, there's no need for us both to work so hard anymore." The more he talked, the more it made sense. You see, at some point I will be pregnant and taking care of our newborn babies. So it's only fair that my husband gets the chance to take time off too, right? But then he stopped getting out of bed in the mornings, started asking me to send him money for meals under $20. I was at work while thinking about this, and my friend Megan told me I had to confront Jack. I honestly was going to keep putting it off, but when I came home I saw Jack slumped over on the couch. He looked like he had been playing FIFA for almost the entire day. I lost it. "Jack, what the actual F?" He looked up at me and his eyes were filled with sorrow. "Baby, I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. The day you got a promotion, I quit my job." "Honey, why? Can we please not talk about this right now?" He cut me off. I sighed. His mouth was covered with what looked like layers of nacho cheese Dorito dust. The room smelled like a sweaty carcass. His butt had sank so far down into the sofa I thought he might disappear, but I respected his wishes and went to bed. Well, kinda. I waited until he was asleep and logged onto our shared savings account. I needed to see if we would be okay until he found another job. Spoiler alert, we would not be. Turns out my husband had drained over $50,000 in just 6 months, all labeled as an unknown expense. I bit down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted red. I know the rational explanation was to assume infidelity, but something in me knew that Jack wouldn't do that. When 6 a.m. hit, I couldn't take it anymore. I shook him awake. "Jack, you need to explain right now why you quit and what exactly you spent $50,000 on." His eyes blinked slowly, so I poured water on his head. Okay, I'm sorry. My plan to stay calm was immediately thrown out the window. I've been taking care of her, and she wanted me to send her money too. "Who's her?" Anger filled my eyes. Suddenly the volume of his voice lowered and he turned super quiet before saying, "My mother." What the F? His mother had died when he was a child. He never even spoke about her. "She's still alive, honey. I'm sorry." I slumped over and buried my head in my hands. Jack didn't say anything, just pulled up the sleeve of his shirt. I instinctively began to trace his scars with my fingers. "Honey, these aren't from when I used to climb trees or run around in the park. They're from my mother." I looked up at him and saw tears streaming down his face. "Every mark on my body is from my mother, all from when I was a defenseless child." Suddenly, it all clicked. Why he flinched at every sound, why he always apologized for things that weren't his fault, but it didn't explain the money. We hadn't talked since I moved out, but for the last year she's been begging me for financial support. I covered his mouth. I didn't want him to explain anymore. I wanted him to know that I trusted his decision-making. "I'm sorry, baby." He held me while we both cried into each other's arms, but our moment was interrupted, because that's when Jack got the call. It was his mother. He picked up straight away, and she begged to move in with us, on the grounds that she was going to die soon, and didn't want to spend her last moments alone. I whispered to Jack that it was up to him, and he said yes. But I soon realized why Jack pretended she was dead for so many years. Because after just a week of living with her, our lives had gone from almost perfect to a living hell. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of hushed voices in our kitchen. I lay still for a moment, trying to make out what they were saying. Jack's deep murmur was punctuated by a higher, more insistent tone. His mother, Vivian. I couldn't catch the exact words, but the tension was palpable even from our bedroom. My stomach knotted as I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the hardwood floor cool beneath my bare feet. I padded to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and staring at my reflection. Dark circles had formed under my eyes, a testament to the sleepless nights since Vivian had moved in. I ran a brush through my tangled hair, trying to make myself presentable. Not that it mattered much anymore. Jack had barely looked at me in days, his attention entirely consumed by his mother's endless demands. When I finally entered the kitchen, the conversation abruptly stopped. Vivian sat at our dining table, wrapped in a silk robe that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her silver hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, and her manicured nails tapped rhythmically against her teacup. "Good morning, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were just discussing Jack's doctor appointment today, for his condition." She emphasized the last word, her eyes gleaming with something that made my skin crawl. Jack wouldn't meet my gaze. "Mom thinks I should see a specialist about my migraines." I frowned. "What migraines? You've never had migraines." "Oh, he's always suffered terribly," Vivian interjected before Jack could respond. "Even as a little boy. He just doesn't like to burden others with his pain. So noble, my son." Her hand reached across the table to grasp his, her long fingers wrapping around his wrist, right where I knew one of his scars lay hidden beneath his sleeve. Jack flinched almost imperceptibly. perceptibly, but didn't pull away. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma providing a momentary comfort. I need to get ready for work, I said, not bothering to hide the coolness in my tone. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Vivian's purse on the counter, designer of course, with something peeking out from the top, a prescription bottle. I made a mental note to check it later. The day at work dragged endlessly. My office, once a sanctuary of productivity and accomplishment, now felt like a temporary escape from the nightmare my home life had become. I stared at spreadsheets without really seeing them, my mind constantly wandering back to Jack and Vivian. My colleague Megan stopped by my desk around lunchtime, concern etched on her face. "You look like hell," she said bluntly, perching on the edge of my desk. "Is it still the mother-in-law from hell?" I nodded, grateful for her directness. Megan was one of the few people who knew the truth, or at least part of it. I hadn't told her about Jack's scars or his childhood. Some things felt too private, too raw to share. "She's draining our savings," I confided, lowering my voice though no one was nearby. "And Jack, it's like he's become a different person around her, like he's reverted to being a child again." Megan's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't sound healthy. Have you considered that she might be, I don't know, manipulating him somehow?" "Of course she is," I said, frustration seeping into my voice. "But he can't see it, or won't see it. It's like she has some kind of hold over him. Maybe you need to get some outside help," Megan suggested. "Like a therapist or something? Someone who specializes in family dynamics?" I nodded absently, though I doubted Jack would agree to therapy. He could barely admit there was a problem, let alone seek help for it. When I returned home that evening, the apartment was unusually quiet. A note on the refrigerator informed me in Jack's hurried scrawl that he and Vivian had gone to a doctor's appointment and would be back late. I felt a mixture of relief and unease at having the place to myself. Taking advantage of the solitude, I began to search for answers. I started in the guest room where Vivian was staying. The space, once minimalist and peaceful, had been transformed by her presence. Expensive clothes spilled from the closet, jewelry and perfume bottles cluttered the dresser, and prescription bottles lined the nightstand. I picked up one of the bottles, examining the label. It was for pain management, prescribed by a doctor, Levine. Another was for anxiety, a third for sleep. All from different doctors, all relatively recent. I took photos of each label with my phone, making a mental note to research them later. As I was replacing the bottles, I noticed a small leather-bound book partially hidden beneath the bed. I hesitated only briefly before retrieving it. It appeared to be a diary or journal, its pages filled with Vivian's elegant handwriting. Most entries were mundane, complaints about the weather, notes about TV shows she'd watched, critiques of people she'd encountered. But then I found entries about Jack. Jack continues to resist my influence, but he'll come around. He always does. The guilt is too deeply ingrained. Sent another request for money today. Mentioned his childhood accidents as a reminder of what happens when he disappoints me. The funds arrived within the hour. His wife is becoming a problem. Too observant, too questioning. I need to separate them somehow. My hands trembled as I read, a cold fury building inside me. This wasn't just manipulation. It was calculated psychological abuse. And it had been going on for months, maybe years, right under my nose. I heard the front door open and quickly returned the journal to its hiding place, slipping out of the guest room just as Jack and Vivian entered the apartment. Vivian looked pale and drawn, leaning heavily on Jack's arm as though she could barely walk. "The doctor says it's worse than they thought," Jack said, his voice tight with worry. "Mom needs to start treatment right away." "What treatment?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "What exactly is wrong with her?" Vivian let out a small pained sound. "It's my heart, dear, and some other complications. Very serious, I'm afraid." "Which doctor did you see?" I pressed, thinking of the multiple prescription bottles from different physicians. "Dr. Mercer," Jack answered before Vivian could speak. "He's a specialist, very well respected." I nodded, making another mental note to look up this Dr. Mercer. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, the words feeling like ashes in my mouth. "I hope the treatment helps." That night, after Jack had fallen into an exhausted sleep, I researched the medications I'd found in Vivian's room. Most were commonly prescribed, but the combination seemed unusual. I also searched for Dr. Mercer and the other physicians whose names were on the prescription bottles. Dr. Levine and Dr. Chen both appeared to be legitimate doctors with practices in the city, but Dr. Mercer was harder to pin down. No website, no reviews, just a listing in an old medical directory with an address that, when I mapped it, turned out to be a vacant lot. The next day, I called in sick to work and waited until Jack and Vivian left for what they said was another doctor's appointment. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Trevor, a former police detective recommended by a colleague. We met at a coffee shop several blocks from my apartment. "So you think your mother-in-law is faking an illness to manipulate your husband?" Trevor summarized after I'd explained the situation. "Yes, and possibly committing prescription fraud," I added, showing him the photos I'd taken of the medication bottles. "And there's more. She's been draining our savings, and I think she's been emotionally abusing my husband since he was a child." Trevor's expression remained professional, but I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence beyond the prescriptions?" I hesitated, then told him about the journal and the scars on Jack's body. He told me she caused those injuries when he was a child, but he's still under her control somehow. It's like he can't say no to her. Trevor nodded thoughtfully. "It's not uncommon for abuse victims to maintain relationships with their abusers, especially when it's apparent. The psychological bonds can be incredibly strong. Can you help me?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. "I'll look into the doctors, the prescriptions, and see what I can find out about Vivian's background," Trevor promised. "But you need to be careful. If she's as manipulative as you say, confronting her directly could be dangerous. For you and for your husband." I left the meeting feeling both relieved and terrified. Someone else finally believed me, but the reality of what we might uncover was daunting. Over the next week, Vivian's condition supposedly worsened. She spent most days in bed, emerging only when Jack was home to wait on her hand and foot. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, going to work, coming home, pretending I didn't notice how Jack grew more haggard and withdrawn with each passing day. Trevor called me at work with his preliminary findings. Your mother-in-law has been using at least 3 different identities, he said without preamble. Vivian Carter, Elizabeth Thompson, and Margaret Wilson. She's got credit cards, bank accounts, and prescriptions under all 3 names. My heart raced. That's illegal, right? Very. And there's more. I checked with the medical board. Doctor. Mercer hasn't practiced medicine in over 5 years. He surrendered his license after a malpractice suit. So she's seeing a doctor who isn't even licensed anymore? If she's seeing him at all, Trevor said grimly. I'm still working on tracking down her actual medical records, but so far I haven't found any evidence of the heart condition she claims to have. That evening I came home to find Jack packing a suitcase. My stomach dropped. What are you doing? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom needs to go to a specialized treatment center in Philadelphia. I'm going with her. For how long? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. A few weeks, maybe a month. He continued folding clothes mechanically, his movements stiff and robotic. Jack, we need to talk about this, I said, placing my hand on his arm. About your mother, about what's been happening. He finally looked at me, his eyes dull and lifeless. There's nothing to talk about. She's dying. She needs me. Is she really dying though? I asked softly. Have you seen any actual medical reports? Spoken to her doctors yourself? A flash of uncertainty crossed his face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. Of course she is. Why would she lie about something like that? To control you, I said bluntly, like she's been doing your entire life. His face hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. I know about the different identities, Jack. Elizabeth Thompson and Margaret Wilson. I know about the fake doctor. Dr. Mercer lost his license years ago, and I know she's been stealing from us. Jack's face paled. How do you? I hired someone to investigate her, I admitted, because I was worried about you. About us. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to him. His shoulders slumped, and he sat heavily on the edge of the bed. She said you wouldn't understand, he murmured, that you'd try to come between us. Jack, please, I pleaded, kneeling in front of him. Think about what's happening. She's isolating you, making you dependent on her, just like when you were a child. This isn't love, it's abuse. He stood abruptly, his expression closing off. I need to finish packing. Mom's waiting. I felt like I was losing him, not just to Vivian, but to the broken child he became in her presence. If you go with her now, I won't be here when you get back, I said quietly. He paused, his back to me. Is that an ultimatum? It's a boundary, I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. I can't watch you destroy yourself for her. I won't. Jack turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine. For a brief moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd married. Strong, kind, independent. Then it was gone, replaced by a resigned emptiness. I'm sorry, he said simply, and continued packing. I left the bedroom, tears streaming down my face, and nearly collided with Vivian in the hallway. She was dressed immaculately, not a hint of illness in her appearance. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. He'll always choose me, she said softly, her voice almost kind. He knows what happens when he doesn't. In that moment, I saw her clearly, not as the frail, dying woman she pretended to be, but as the monster who had tormented Jack for decades, and I knew I couldn't leave him alone with her. I retreated to the living room, pulled out my phone, and texted Trevor. They're leaving for Philadelphia tonight. Need to stop them. His response was immediate. On my way, bringing a friend from the fraud division. The next hour was the longest of my life. I sat in the living room, pretending to read a book while Jack and Vivian finished packing. Vivian kept shooting me triumphant little smiles, clearly believing she'd won. Jack avoided looking at me entirely. When the doorbell rang, Vivian frowned. Are you expecting someone? I stood, setting my book aside. Actually, yes. Trevor entered with a tall, serious-looking man who introduced himself as Detective Liam Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. Vivian's face drained of color. What is this? Jack demanded, looking between me and the newcomers. Mrs. Carter, Detective Rodriguez addressed Vivian formally. Or should I say Ms. Thompson? Or perhaps Ms. Wilson? We have some questions about multiple identity fraud, prescription substance fraud, and financial exploitation. Vivian's demeanor changed instantly. Gone was the frail, sick woman, replaced by someone cold and calculating. This is ridiculous. My son will tell you I've been very ill. We've spoken with all 3 doctors whose names appear on your prescriptions, Trevor interrupted. 2 of them confirmed they prescribed medication for you, but for minor issues, nothing life-threatening. The 3rd, Dr. Mercer, hasn't practiced medicine in years. Jack looked stunned. Mom, what are they talking about? Vivian turned to him, her expression softening into the manipulative mask I'd come to recognize. Darling, they're trying to separate us, just like I warned you. You know how much I need you right now. What we know, Detective Rodriguez said firmly, is that you've been operating under multiple identities to obtain prescription medications and financial benefits fraudulently. We also have evidence of significant withdrawals from your son's accounts that appear to be coerced. Jack turned to me, his expression a mixture of confusion and betrayal. You did this? You called the police on my mother? I called them to help you, I said gently. To help us. Vivian must have sensed she was losing control of the situation, because she suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed onto the sofa with a dramatic moan. My heart, Jack, my pills. Jack moved automatically to help her, but Trevor stepped forward. She's faking, Jack. There's nothing wrong with her heart. How would you know? Jack snapped, reaching for Vivian's purse where she kept her medications. Because we've subpoenaed her actual medical records, Detective Rodriguez said calmly. She has mild hypertension and arthritis. That's it. Jack froze, the med bottle in his hand. He stared at his mother, who continued to moan and clutch her chest. Slowly, deliberately, he set the bottle down and stepped away from her. Is that true? He asked, his voice barely audible. Have you been lying about being sick? Vivian's performance stopped abruptly. She sat up straight, her eyes hard and cold. You ungrateful child. After everything I've done for you, what have you done for me? Jack asked, his voice gaining strength. Besides hurt me, control me, take from me, I gave you life, Vivian hissed. I raised you when your father abandoned us. I sacrificed everything for you. You abused me, Jack said quietly, the simple truth seeming to liberate him. You're still abusing me. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward. Mrs. Carter, we need you to come with us to answer some questions. Vivian stood, smoothing her expensive clothes with dignity. This is all a misunderstanding. My son is very disturbed, has been since childhood. Imagines things. Don't you, Jack? The familiar threat in her tone made Jack flinch, but he stood his ground. Not anymore, Mom. I'm not afraid of you anymore. As the detective led Vivian away, she turned back to Jack one last time. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, just like you always do. When the door closed behind them, Jack seemed to collapse in on himself. I guided him to the sofa, where he buried his face in his hands. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I couldn't see it. I couldn't stop myself from falling back into her trap. I held him as he cried, years of pent-up pain and fear finally breaking free. It's not your fault, I said softly. It never was. Trevor lingered awkwardly by the door. She'll probably be released on bail, but the fraud charges are solid. And if you're willing to testify about the financial coercion and past abuse, they can add more charges. Jack looked up, his face tear-streaked but resolute. I'll testify. It's time I stopped hiding from the truth. After Trevor left, Jack and I talked for hours. He told me everything, the full extent of his childhood abuse, how Vivian had contacted him a year ago claiming to be destitute, how the guilt and fear had overwhelmed his better judgment. I listened, offering comfort when he needed it, space when he didn't. I understand if you want to leave, he said finally, as dawn broke outside our windows. I've been a terrible husband. I chose her over you. I took his hand, tracing the scars on his wrist gently. You were a victim, Jack. You still are. But now you have a chance to heal, to break free from her for good. Will you help me? He asked, vulnerability raw in his voice. Yes, I promised. But you need professional help too. Someone who specializes in childhood trauma and abusive relationships. He nodded, a small spark of hope lighting his eyes. I'll find someone today. The next few weeks were difficult. Jack started intensive therapy, confronting decades of abuse and manipulation. Vivian was charged with multiple counts of fraud and released on bail pending trial. She made several attempts to contact Jack, tearful voicemails, manipulative letters, even sending mutual acquaintances to plead her case. Each time, Jack maintained his boundaries, though I could see how much it cost him. Our marriage was fragile, rebuilding slowly on a foundation of honesty and mutual support. There were setbacks, nights when Jack would wake screaming from nightmares, days when he'd withdraw into himself, overwhelmed by guilt and confusion. But there was progress too. He began to recognize Vivian's manipulation tactics, to understand that her love had always been conditional on his compliance. 3 months after Vivian's arrest, I discovered I was pregnant. Jack and I had been careful, knowing we needed time to heal before bringing a child into our lives. But sometimes life has other plans. When I told Jack, his initial joy quickly gave way to panic. What if I'm like her? He whispered, terror in his eyes. What if I hurt our child the way she hurt me? You won't, I assured him, though I understood his fear. The fact that you're even worried about it proves you're nothing like her. Jack doubled down on his therapy, specifically addressing his fears about parenthood. His therapist suggested a support group for adult survivors of child abuse who were becoming parents themselves. There, Jack found understanding and practical strategies from others who shared his concerns. Vivian's trial was scheduled for when I was 6 months pregnant. Jack was set to testify against her, a prospect that filled him with both dread and determination. As the date approached, Vivian's attempts to contact him grew more desperate. She somehow got my cell number and called repeatedly, alternating between threats and pleas. She says she's dying for real this time, Jack told me one evening after screening another of her voicemails, that the stress of the trial is culling her. Do you believe her? I asked carefully. He was quiet for a moment, his hand resting gently on my growing belly. No, he said finally, I don't. And even if it were true, I can't sacrifice our future, our child's future, for her anymore. The morning of the trial, Jack was calm, focused. He'd prepared extensively with the prosecutor, ready to detail years of abuse and recent financial exploitation. I sat in the courtroom, my heart swelling with pride as he took the stand and spoke his truth clearly and without shame. Vivian sat at the defense table, playing the role of fragile elderly woman to perfection. But when Jack described the scars on his body, the psychological torture, the way she'd manipulated him his entire life, I saw her mask slip. For just a moment, her eyes blazed with the same cold fury I'd glimpsed in our apartment months ago. The jury took less than a day to find her guilty on all counts. The judge, citing the particularly callous nature of her crimes against her own son, sentenced her to 7 years in prison. As she was led away, Vivian locked eyes with Jack one last time. You're nothing without me, she hissed. Nothing. Jack stood tall, his voice steady as he replied, I'm everything without you. I always was. The next few weeks were a blur. My pregnancy was progressing well, and Jack and I were slowly rebuilding our lives without Vivian's shadow hanging over us. We moved to a new apartment, somewhere Vivian had never been, and Jack found a job that better accommodated his therapy schedule. One evening, as we sat on our new balcony watching the sunset, Jack took my hand. I've been thinking about names for the baby, he said. Oh, what did you have in mind? He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that still made my heart skip. If it's a boy, I like Ethan. It means a strong or enduring. And if it's a girl? I asked, leaning into his embrace. Hope, he said simply, because that's what you gave me when I had none. I felt tears prick my eyes as I placed his hand on my belly, where our child, our future, was growing. Hope, I repeated. It's perfect. The next few months were a blur. I moved back to my hometown of Greenfield, about 2 hours outside the city. My parents helped me find a small 2-bedroom house to rent, and my company was surprisingly accommodating about the transfer. I started working remotely 3 days a week, only going into the satellite office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. My mom came over almost every day, helping me set up the nursery and bringing home cooked meals. Dad fixed things around the house and installed extra security, new locks, a doorbell camera, the works. I didn't tell them everything about Jack and Vivian, just that we were taking space while Jack worked on some personal issues. Jack texted me every few days with updates. He'd found a therapist specializing in childhood trauma. He'd moved to a small apartment near his new job. He'd blocked Vivian's number and all her known aliases. Each message ended with, "I miss you," or "I love you," but I never responded to those parts. I was 7 months pregnant when the first weird thing happened. I came home from work to find a small package on my doorstep. No shipping label, just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a baby onesie with Grandma's little angel printed on it. I immediately called my mom, who confirmed she hadn't left anything. I then called Jack. "I swear I didn't tell her where you are," he said, sounding genuinely shocked. I haven't spoken to her since that day with Trevor and Liam. I believed him, but that didn't explain how Vivian found me. I checked my doorbell camera footage, but whoever dropped off the package stayed out of view. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello, dear." Vivian's voice made my skin crawl. "How's my grandbaby doing?" I hung up and blocked the number, then called the police to report harassment. They took my information but didn't seem too concerned. "Family disputes are complicated," the officer said. "Unless there's a threat, there's not much we can do." That night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. grandmaknowsbest@gmail.com. The subject line was, "We need to talk about Jack." I deleted it without opening it and set up a filter to send any emails from that address straight to trash. I told Jack about these incidents the next day. He sounded genuinely horrified. "I'll handle this," he promised. "She won't bother you again." For a week, everything was quiet. Then my neighbor Diane knocked on my door. "There was a woman asking about you yesterday," she said. "Older lady, very well dressed. Said she was your mother-in-law and had lost your address. I didn't tell her anything, but I thought you should know." My blood ran cold. Vivian was in Greenfield, actively looking for me. I called Jack immediately. "She's here, Jack, in my town, asking neighbors about me." "That's impossible," he said. "Trevor's been keeping tabs on her. She's supposed to be in Philadelphia staying with her sister." "Well, she's not. She's here." Jack was quiet for a moment. "I'm coming there. Today. This has to stop." Part of me wanted to tell him to stay away, but I was scared. Having Jack around, someone who knew how Vivian operated, seemed like a good idea. I agreed to let him stay in the spare room for a few days. He arrived that evening, looking better than the last time I'd seen him. He'd gained back some weight, and his eyes were clearer. He brought his therapy workbooks to show me he was serious about recovery. "I'm so sorry about all of this," he said after I showed him to the guest room. "I never should have let her into our lives." I nodded but kept my distance. "Just help me figure out how to make her leave me alone." The next morning, Jack went into town to ask around about Vivian while I worked from home. He came back looking troubled. "She's definitely here. She's staying at the Bluebird Motel on Route 9. The manager there knows her as Elizabeth Thompson. One of her fake identities," I said, remembering the IDs I'd found. "Yeah, and she's been telling people she's here to reconcile with her estranged daughter-in-law before her grandchild is born." I felt sick. "What are we going to do?" Jack's jaw tightened. "I'm going to talk to her. Make it clear that if she doesn't leave you alone, I'll go to the police about the identity fraud." "No," I said firmly. "That's what she wants. She wants to see you, to get her hooks back in. We need another plan." We decided to document everything instead. Jack helped me set up more security cameras. We started keeping a log of every contact or attempt at contact. I filed for a restraining order, though the lawyer warned me it might be difficult to get without evidence of direct threats. 3 days after Jack arrived, I woke up to find him gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to confront Mom. Back soon. Don't worry." But I did worry. I called him repeatedly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. By noon, I was frantic. I called Trevor, who promised to drive up from Boston to help look for Jack. Around 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. It was Jack, looking shell-shocked. "What happened?" I demanded as I let him in. "She's not dying," he said, his voice hollow. "That was a lie, too." "We already knew that, Jack." He shook his head. "No, you don't understand. She's perfectly healthy. The doctor she claimed diagnosed her doesn't exist. The medication she's been taking are vitamins and sugar pills." I sat down trying to process this. "So she faked a terminal illness to move in with us? Why?" "Money," Jack said simply. "She's broke. She gambled away everything she had, including her house. She needed a place to stay and access to funds. But the abuse? Your scars?" Jack's eyes darkened. "That part was real. She just used it to manipulate me. She knew I'd feel guilty if I didn't help her." I felt a surge of anger. "And you let her. You chose her over me." "I know," he whispered. "I can't explain it. It's like, when she's around, I turn back into that scared little kid. I can't think straight." We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I asked, "Where is she now?" "Still at the motel. I told her I'd call the police if she contacted you again. I don't know if it worked." It didn't. The next day, I received a bouquet of flowers at work. The card read, "Can't wait to meet my grandbaby. Love, Grandma Vivian." My coworkers thought it was sweet. I felt violated. She knew where I worked now. That night, Jack and I came up with a new plan. If Vivian wanted money and security, we'd offer it to her, with conditions. Jack called her and arranged a meeting at a public restaurant. I insisted on going with him. "I'm not letting you face her alone again." The meeting was set for Saturday at noon. We arrived early and chose a table with a clear view of the entrance. Jack was visibly nervous, his leg bouncing under the table. Vivian walked in at 12:05, looking nothing like the frail, dying woman who had moved into our apartment. She was well-dressed, her hair freshly colored, wearing more makeup than I'd ever seen on her. "Jack, darling, and look at you, all pregnant and glowing," she said as she sat down. I didn't return her smile. "Let's get to the point, Vivian. We know you're not dying. We know about the fake IDs. We know you're broke." Her smile didn't falter. "Well, aren't you the little detective?" Jack cleared his throat. "Mom, we're willing to help you. One last time. We'll set you up with enough money to get an apartment and start over. But there are conditions." Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. "What conditions?" "You leave town. Today. You don't contact either of us again. You don't try to see the baby. Ever." She laughed. "You can't keep a grandmother from her grandchild. It's not right. You lost any right to be in our lives when you lied, stole from us, and tried to destroy our marriage." I said firmly. Vivian turned to Jack, her expression suddenly wounded. Are you going to let her talk to your mother this way, after everything I've done for you? I saw Jack flinch slightly, but he held firm. This is non-negotiable, Mom. Take the money and leave, or we go to the police with evidence of your identity fraud. Her face hardened. You wouldn't dare. Jack pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Inside were copies of all the fake IDs I'd photographed, plus bank statements showing the suspicious transactions. Try me, he said quietly. For a moment, I saw genuine fear in Vivian's eyes. Then she composed herself and reached for the folder. Jack pulled it back. Do we have a deal? She smiled tightly. Of course, darling. I would never want to cause problems for you and your family. The way she said family made my skin crawl. We laid out the terms. $10,000 in cash today, with another $10,000 to follow in 6 months if she kept her end of the bargain. She would sign a notarized agreement stating she would have no contact with us or our child. Vivian agreed too quickly, which made me suspicious. But we had the agreement ready, and a notary waiting at the bank where we'd withdraw the cash. Everything went smoothly, too smoothly. Vivian signed the papers, took the money, and even hugged Jack goodbye. She didn't try to hug me, which was a relief. She gave in too easily, I said as we drove home. She's planning something. Jack sighed. Maybe. Or maybe she just knows when she's struck. I wasn't convinced, but I was too tired to argue. The baby had been kicking all day, and my back was culling me. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. As I was walking back to bed, I noticed a light on downstairs. Thinking Jack must be up, I went to check. He wasn't in the kitchen or living room. The back door was slightly ajar. I peered out into the yard and saw Jack standing near the fence, talking to someone. Even in the dim light, I recognized Vivian's silhouette. My heart sank. I grabbed my phone and quietly took a video, making sure to capture their faces in the yard light. They were speaking too quietly for me to hear, but their body language was clear. This was not a confrontation. This was a conspiracy. I went back upstairs and locked myself in my bedroom. I sent the video to Trevor with a simple message. Need help. Jack still working with Vivian. Trevor called me immediately. I'm on my way. Don't confront them. Just stay in your room and pretend to be asleep. I did as he said. About 20 minutes later, I heard Jack come back inside. He tried my bedroom door, found it locked, and eventually went back to the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. Around 7 a.m., there was a knock at the front door. Jack answered it, and I heard Trevor's voice. They talked for a few minutes, their voices rising, then footsteps on the stairs. She's sleeping, Jack said. I need to talk to her, Trevor insisted. I opened my door. I'm awake. Trevor looked relieved to see me. Jack looked guilty. What's going on? I asked, though I already knew. Trevor showed Jack his phone, the video I'd sent. Want to explain this? Jack's face crumpled. It's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you're still conspiring with your mother behind your pregnant wife's back, Trevor said. Jack sat down on the top stair, his head in his hands. She threatened to hurt herself if I didn't meet her. Said she had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. And you believed her? I asked incredulously. I don't know what I believed, Jack admitted. I just reacted, like I always do with her. Trevor shook his head in disgust. This is exactly what she wants. She's playing you, man. Again. Jack looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I swear I wasn't plotting anything with her. I told her again to leave town, that the deal was final. And did she agree? I asked. He hesitated. She said she would, but what? She wanted to stay until the baby was born, just to see her grandchild once. I felt a cold fury building inside me. Absolutely not. That's what I told her, Jack said quickly. I swear. Trevor put his hand on my shoulder. Pack a bag. You're coming to stay with me and Liam for a while. Jack stood up. No, please, I'll fix this. I'll make her leave for good. You've had your chance, Trevor said firmly. Multiple chances. It's time to put your wife and child first. I went back to my room and started packing. Jack followed me, begging for another chance. I ignored him and called my doctor to see if I could transfer my prenatal care to Boston. While I was on the phone, I heard shouting downstairs, then a crash. I hung up and rushed down to find Trevor and Jack in a physical altercation. They'd knocked over a lamp. Stop it, I yelled. Both of you. They separated, breathing hard. Jack's lip was bleeding. What is wrong with you two? I demanded. He's still defending her, Trevor spat. After everything she's done. Jack wiped blood from his mouth. She's my mother. I can't just cut her off completely. Yes, you can, I said quietly. And you need to, for your child's sake, if not for mine. Jack looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. I don't know how. And that was the moment I knew our marriage was truly over. Jack would never be free of Vivian's influence. He would never put our family first. Not completely. I'm going to Boston with Trevor, I said. I'll have my lawyer contact you about divorce proceedings. Jack's face went pale. Divorce? No, please. We can work this out. I shook my head. We can't. Not as long as you're still under her thumb. I finished packing while Trevor kept an eye on Jack. Before we left, I turned to my husband one last time. I'll always care about you, Jack, and I'll never keep our child from you. But I won't live like this anymore, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when Vivian will show up next or what lies she'll tell. Jack didn't try to stop us as we walked out. He just stood in the doorway, looking lost. Trevor drove me to Boston that day. His apartment with Liam was small but comfortable, and they made me feel welcome. I took a week off work to get settled and transfer my medical care. Jack texted me daily, but I only responded to messages about practical matters, forwarding my mail, what to do with the house, that sort of thing. I found a good divorce lawyer who specialized in cases involving children. 2 weeks after I left Greenfield, Trevor came home looking troubled. What's wrong? I asked. He hesitated. Jack's in the hospital. My heart dropped. What happened? Vivian happened? Apparently after you left, he told her it was over for good. No more money, no more contact. She didn't take it well. Showed up at his apartment and went crazy. Neighbors called the cops when they heard screaming. Is he okay? Physically, yeah. Some cuts and bruises, but he's pretty messed up mentally. Liam's with him now. I sat down, feeling suddenly dizzy. Did they arrest her? Trevor nodded. Finally. She's being charged with assault and trespassing. And they found those fake IDs in her motel room, so there'll be fraud charges too. I felt no satisfaction, just a profound sadness. Can I see him? Are you sure that's a good idea? I wasn't sure of anything anymore, but I knew I needed to see Jack with my own eyes to make sure he was okay. The hospital was only a few blocks away. Trevor walked me there and waited in the lobby while I went up to Jack's room. He looked terrible. His left eye was swollen shut, and there were scratches down his face. His right arm was in a cast. "Hey," I said softly from the doorway. He turned toward my voice, his good eye widening in surprise. "You came." I moved closer to the bed. Trevor told me what happened. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It's not your fault." He tried to sit up straighter and winced. "It's mine. All of it. I should have listened to you from the beginning." I sat in the chair next to his bed. "What happened exactly?" Jack sighed. "After you left, I realized you were right about everything. I called my therapist for an emergency session, and we talked about setting boundaries with my mother. Real ones this time." He paused, looking down at his cast. "I went to her motel room to tell her it was over for good. No more money, no more chances. She didn't take it well." "She did this to you?" I gestured at his injuries. He nodded, threw a lamp at my head. When I tried to leave, she grabbed a knife from her purse. I put my arm up to block it, and he gestured at the cast. The motel manager heard the commotion and called the police. They got there just as she was trying to stab me again. I felt sick. "Jack, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. This needed to happen." He looked at me directly. I needed to see her for what she really is. Not the mother I wanted her to be, but the person she actually is. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I asked, "What happens now?" "She'll go to jail probably. Between the assault and the fraud charges, she's looking at serious time." He hesitated. "And I'm going to keep going to therapy. Twice a week now." I nodded. "That's good. I don't expect this to change anything between us." He added quickly. "I understand why you left, why you want a divorce. I just want you to know I'm finally doing the work I should have done a long time ago." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me was proud of him for standing up to Vivian at last. Another part wondered if it was too little, too late. "I should go," I said, standing up. "You need to rest." Jack reached out with his good hand. "Thank you for coming. It means more than you know." I squeezed his hand briefly, then left. Trevor was waiting in the hallway. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "Let's go home." The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, work, and divorce paperwork. Jack was released from the hospital and went back to his apartment in Greenfield. He texted me updates about his therapy progress and asked how the baby was doing. Vivian was denied bail due to the violent nature of her attack on Jack and her history of using multiple identities. She would remain in jail until her trial, which was a relief. I was 8.5 months pregnant when Jack called instead of texting. "Can we talk?" he asked. "In person?" I hesitated. "About what?" "The future. Our child's future. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I have some ideas I'd like to discuss." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a cafe near Trevor and Liam's apartment. When I arrived, Jack was already there, looking nervous but better than the last time I'd seen him. The bruises had faded, and his cast was gone, replaced by a brace. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "You look great." I smiled despite myself. "I look like a whale, but thanks." He laughed, then grew serious. "I've been thinking about what kind of father I want to be, what kind of example I want to set, and I realized I don't want our child to grow up thinking it's normal to let people treat you badly, even if they're family, especially if they're family." He took a deep breath. "So I'm not contesting the divorce or your request for primary custody." I was surprised. "You're not?" He shook his head. "Number. You're right to be cautious about me. I haven't proven myself trustworthy yet. Jack ... Let me finish, please. I'm not giving up on being in our child's life. I want to be a good father, but I understand that I need to earn your trust back first." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "So here's what I'm proposing. I'll continue therapy, I'll take parenting classes, I'll submit to whatever visitation schedule you think is appropriate, and I'll prove to you over time that I can be the father our child deserves." I felt tears welling up. "That sounds reasonable." Jack smiled, looking relieved. "There's one more thing. I'm moving to Boston." "What? Why?" "To be closer to the baby, and to you, if you'll let me." "Not in a romantic way," he added quickly. "I understand that ship has sailed, but as co-parents, I think we should try to make this as easy as possible." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was touched by his effort. Another part was wary of letting him back into my life in any capacity. "I need to think about it," I finally said. "Of course. Take all the time you need." As we were leaving the cafe, I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. I gasped and grabbed the edge of the table. Jack was immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just Braxton Hicks contractions. I've been having them for weeks, but this one felt different, stronger, and then I felt a gush of fluid between my legs." "Oh God," I whispered. "My water just broke." Jack's eyes widened. "The baby's coming? Now? But you're not due for 2 more weeks." "Apparently the baby didn't get the memo," I said through gritted teeth as another contraction hit. Jack went into action mode. He helped me to his car and drove me straight to the hospital, calling Trevor on the way to let him know what was happening. The next 12 hours were a blur of pain, breathing exercises, and medical staff coming and going. Jack stayed by my side the whole time, holding my hand, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth, and encouraging me when I felt like I couldn't go on. At 3:17 a.m., our daughter was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfect, screaming baby girl. "She's beautiful," Jack whispered as the nurse placed her on my chest, just like her mom. I looked down at our daughter, then up at Jack. In that moment, all the anger and hurt of the past months seemed to fade away, not disappear completely, but recede enough for me to see a possible future where we could be, if not husband and wife, at least partners in raising this incredible little person. "Do you want to hold her?" I asked. Jack's eyes filled with tears. "Can I?" I nodded, and he carefully took our daughter in his arms. The look of wonder and love on his face told me everything I needed to know. Whatever his failings as a husband, Jack was going to fight like hell to be a good father. "What should we name her?" he asked softly. I had been thinking about names for months but hadn't settled on one. Now, looking at her tiny face, I knew. "Hope," I said. Her name is Hope. Jack smiled. It's perfect. As I watched Jack holding our daughter, I realized something important. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. We still had a divorce to get through, custody arrangements to finalize, and a lot of trust to rebuild. But for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. Hope that Jack would continue his journey of healing and become the father our daughter deserved. Hope that Vivian would face justice for her actions and never be able to hurt us again. And hope that somehow, in our own imperfect way, we would figure out how to be a family. Not the family I had imagined when Jack and I got married, but maybe, just maybe, the family we were meant to be all along.